Sean Payton seems to be out of the Texans sweepstakes. Colin Cowherd basically put Cal and the Texans on blast. Anyway, give me Ryans, Steichen, or Kafka, my top three. I don't like Kafka. He doesn't have it. He's not dynamic enough. I like Steichen. D'Amico is my favorite. I'm going to tell you something, though, man. Let's go over the Colin Cowherd stuff. And I know a lot of you who have been consuming sports radio today are probably sick of it. I'll give you a little bit of a fresh angle on it. But just to recap.
There's a lot of bad owners out there that sometimes they inherited money from a family. A lot of times they don't even like the sport. Somebody dies in the family, they're left with it. But the gap, I can tell you this, the gap, listening to stories last night, between the haves and the have-nots in this league is not just quarterbacks or coaches. It is ownership. Even on Zoom calls, you can spot the dysfunction. Zoom calls, not even being in the room, you can see why certain teams lose.
Okay. The Zoom call. That was the big thing. That was the big dead giveaway. Colin Cowherd has dinner with Sean Payton a couple nights ago. The next morning, Colin comes in and tells this story about Sean Payton talking about ownership, and the Zoom call is the dead giveaway because at that point it hasn't been reported that Payton had met with anybody else via Zoom, and the Broncos group had been in person. I know there's more to that now. Apparently Russell Wilson had talked with Sean Payton. Great, fine. If Russell Wilson is going to sell himself to Sean Payton, those two guys couldn't seem more diametrically opposite. I don't think Russell Wilson is going to be the reason that Sean Payton goes to Denver, if he does go to Denver. But ownership might. As far as the way that Colin Cowherd relayed that, what I'm trying to keep in mind is that, yes, certainly, maybe Sean Payton sensed dysfunction just by the way he was interacting with Cal McNair or Nick Caserio and Hannah McNair, whatever. I'm also wondering, though, because this happened to me a lot just in radio, talking to people like Colin Cowherd, is that you tell a story and they don't get it quite right. And their takeaway from it comes up like a week later when they'll say, "Hey, Seth, remember when you told that story about how you hated your teammate or something?" I'm like, no. I didn't hate him. I said he was being a jerk in this one instance, but I didn't hate him. And with Cowherd, this is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that what Sean Payton said, when he was talking about dysfunction, I'm hoping what he said was that he had a conversation with Cal and Hannah about the dysfunction of the organization, which was obvious and apparent over the last 2 or 3 years, and that Sean Payton knows a lot of people from the Patriots and in football in general, obviously. So that's what my hope is. And if it was simply that the interview was so bad that Sean Payton just could sense that it was a dysfunctional, and I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out, too, is like I would understand if he wasn't impressed by somebody for whatever reason, but I don't quite get how he could sense the dysfunction unless it was Cal and Hannah. We should just call them, Cal and Hannah. Cal and Hannah arguing with each other or something. I don't get the sense that would happen. But if he was unimpressed, that's one thing. I'm hoping that it was them telling him exactly what the dysfunction was and how it's going to be different moving forward. I also think it's kind of weird that Cowherd would disclose that so brazenly and openly without really disguising who it was. And some people brought this up today, is that maybe that's part of the negotiating itself, that somehow he wants to keep his options open and perhaps wants to make Houston feel a little bit desperate for that maybe they have to up the ante because he's now reportedly wanting $20 or $25 million, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but it's not my money, and there's no salary cap. So I'm not completely saying that they're doomed or anything because of what Colin Cowherd said. It would concern me in terms of, okay, what did Steichen, what did Ryans, what did any of these guys feel about their interview with the Texans, and did they sense any kind of dysfunction?
That element's critical. The
Okay, this is Sean Payton talking about strife in ownership
element. There are a number of teams. It's hard to win in this league, and it's certainly harder to win in this league if there's internal problems before you even play an opponent.
That is where I'm generally optimistic that the strife that would have been there with various people, whether it's Jack Easterby or Bill O'Brien or anybody else, I'm fairly confident that anything to that level is gone. And I don't think that would be a barrier. So that was Sean Payton talking earlier this week. Brown Chubby Bear says he's 100% off Sean Payton. Give me Shane or Kafka and call it a day. Yeah, again, I'm not even that enamored of Sean Payton. I'm not convinced that he's actually all that hungry to coach again because, look, he's sitting there. I think there's a point where he had a year of broadcasting and he realized there's $100 million sitting on the table. And sure, yeah, I love coaching. I want to get back into it. I don't know. I need guys that are driven by like anger or a need to prove their father, who's been dead for 20 years or so, that he could be proud of him. Like deep psychological stuff that drives people. Not that he's got $20 million sitting out there. Somebody young and hungry. That's who I feel like I want right now. I do like the potential insurance policy that Sean Payton would provide. I think it's unlikely that under Sean Payton the Texans would have a 3-win or a 4-win season. I think the offense would be viable enough with whomever ended up being quarterback, and I think he would not hurt your young quarterback. Are there other guys, Steichen or otherwise, that might develop him better, perhaps? But it's an insurance policy. I think that money you're spending on him is an insurance policy. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, it didn't go well for him as planned, but he also, when he went to Miami, I think his worst season. He might have had a 6-10 season. Went to the playoffs, but with Dan Marino, who was on fumes at that point. So it's an insurance policy at best there. He made a Twitter comparison, Colin Cowherd did, that I'm not sure I agreed with.
When Twitter had a board and several voices, and there were concerns beyond the former owner, Jack, right? It was one company. Then it's a different company when Elon Musk takes it over. It's authoritarian. Now, many people love Musk. Many people hate Elon Musk. But it's a totally different company. That's the reality, is many of the richest people in the world are impulsive. You saw what happened to the Colts this year when Jim Irsay started making key decisions.
I'll be honest with you. He lost me a little bit because I don't know if he was talking about the Texans specifically at that point or just owners in general and how they can change. I found it ironic because he's about to talk about the Chiefs here, and I found it ironic because I think if you look at the Texans, sure, have they changed since Bob McNair was the owner and then Cal took over? I think they have, and I honestly think even though it was an ugly path to get here, I think in some ways Cal will be a more aggressive owner. I think he's going to be much more willing to spend in free agency. And ultimately, yeah, it's a different organization, but the Chiefs organization went through the same thing when Lamar Hunt died. Lamar Hunt died. He'd been, original AFC owner and just a stalwart of the league. And the Chiefs were kind of a mess for a few years until Clark Hunt really became the guy and the CEO, and they got things back on track. But they went through some dysfunctional, weird Todd Haley type of years there for a couple years, even though Todd Haley went to the playoffs. And now, of course, they're the belle of the ball. So I don't think it's ever as simple as, well, this billionaire is trash, but this billionaire is good. The Bills, just a few years ago, had an owner who's the same owner, or the same owners now as they were then, but they were clueless. People in Buffalo thought they had to sell the team. They just don't know what they're doing. It was that's how it goes. As far as Irsay, Irsay's he's a whack job. He's a wackadoodle, but he's had successful teams. Belichick and Andy Reid. That is the point he makes. He makes a point about Belichick and Andy Reid here.
So both Belichick and Andy Reid chose owner over quarterback, over division, over roster, over cap issues, over draft capital. Who owns the team?
It's concerning if all of that is just as Cowherd described it, and that Sean Payton sensed dysfunction just immediately from his interview with Cal and Hannah. I don't for the life of me know why Sean Payton would be cool with Cowherd saying that. And maybe he wasn't. I don't know. Maybe Cowherd thought he was covering his tracks better than he was. But if Cowherd wasn't just making a mistake there, it almost seems too contrived for it to be anything more than a negotiating ploy, whether it's true or not. And that's the other thing, too. I think that one point that Cowherd makes very well when he was doing his monologue about this was, and Sean Payton says this actually even better, there are multiple factors. And when it comes down to the Texans, okay, maybe Payton isn't really comfortable with ownership, and yet they have this clean slate. They have all these draft picks. Maybe he respects Caserio, but thinks that things need to be rejiggered a little bit. It doesn't shut the door on the Texans if you're somebody who wants Payton. If you look at the Panthers, who are interested in Payton, that looks like a division that's wide open. But Cowherd made the very good point that it's wide open, but you don't have a quarterback. And if Payton comes in and wins 7, 8, or 9 games, what do you do then next year to find that quarterback? So this might be the year where Payton feels like, hey, I either like C.J. Stroud or I like Bryce Young. If he likes both of them, that's awesome. And I know he said the thing about not taking a small quarterback, but he left himself some wiggle room right there. So I think that the Texans make a lot of sense in a lot of regards. The Broncos certainly make sense if he likes those owners, but they also have the Russell Wilson issue and problem. The Cardinals make sense, but they have similar issues with either whether Sean Payton likes Kyler Murray or not. So I'm not pessimistic about Cowherd actually, or about Payton actually wanting or being intrigued by the Texans at this point. It's all a little bit weird right now, which it has been. I think we get to these points with the Texans where we feel like, hey, everything's not quite as weird as it used to be. And then you're like, oh, why are you being weird now? I thought we were done with this. Enough of the weirdness. Brown Chubby Bear, you don't like Kafka? Him and Shane are my number 1 and number 2. Okay. I like Kafka. I feel like Kafka is going to have a career arc of this. He's going to get a head coaching job somewhere. People are going to realize that he's not a genuine born leader, and maybe they'll have some good offenses, but he'll struggle to command the attention and stir the passions of a football team. I don't know. Brown Chubby Bear, I don't know if you've watched a lot of the interviews with Kafka, but man, I need juice. Like, I need somebody. I don't need a guy to be, a loud screamer or anything. But like Tony Dungy, he's got some kind of juice to him, He's very quiet and laid back, but he's got something to him, some level of charisma. And I just don't get it with Kafka at all. Maybe it'll come as he gets more comfortable. But the other problem there, too, is I just don't know how much of it is him versus Dayball. And I know Kafka's calling the plays, but I just don't I just don't know yet. And I'm not overly impressed by his personality. As far as Shane Steichen, the biggest thing that I like about Steichen is that he's done it now with 2 quarterbacks who weren't the premier guys in their class. And because he was the offensive coordinator when Herbert won Rookie of the Year. And yes, I know Pep Hamilton was quarterback's coach, but remember, Pep Hamilton was quarterback's coach for Davis Mills too. I think Pep Hamilton might be a hell of a fine quarterback's coach, but not an offensive coordinator. And now Steichen has done it with Jalen Hurts. That's intriguing to me, that he's had that success and he is the play caller for the Eagles. That's intriguing to me. I don't know about his personality, and again, I don't think there's like a classic coaching personality, but you got to have some kind of juice, and he at least displays some personality when I see him working with the players. Kafka seems a lot like a Davis Mills personality type, and he went to Northwestern, another guy that went to a smart school. Nothing wrong with that, Elway, those guys, great going to smart schools, but like Elway, come on, he's Elway. Elway, you guys know my rule. If I can't envision you as a pool hall hustler, then I feel like you might not be a good quarterback or head coach. You got to have a certain level of mischievousness and confidence, and a little bit of just cockiness to get it done for me. And I just don't see that with Kafka. Chrome Drog says that I nailed it. About cashing in. Yeah, about Payton just cashing in. Yeah, I don't mean to accuse the guy of it. I don't get the sense that the guy that quit on the Saints, and maybe that was all pre-planned and engineered, is that once Breeze was gone, that was, they'd been spending and borrowing against the future for so long that it might have been as simple as that he was just waiting until Breeze retired and then he was going to pack it in, because he and Mickey Loomis, the GM, seem to be pretty cool with each other. But I want somebody young and hungry. I want somebody that's going to come in and feel like he needs to prove himself to the world. And right now, Sean Payton is just he looks bored on television, and he's just figured. The guy's did he get remarried or not? Somebody pointed out that his son was up at TCU. His son's 22 or 23 years old. I don't think he's going to sign a 5 or 6 year contract with a team just because his son might be graduating like 3 months from now at TCU. So I'm not going for that one. Let's see. Okay. This is a good point. Beyond 3 says Nick Sirianni came off as shy and the dude really blossomed. That's a good point. Did he come off as shy or just kind of goofy and overly energetic at the press conference? You're exactly right. Like, I've been watching the mic'd ups with guys because that's where I think you get a better indication of exactly how they are with guys. Like Kubiak, Kubiak didn't come off as a guy who had a really strong personality or anything until you actually started watching him interact with players. Or if you're in a meeting room and you're like part of a team that was getting yelled at by Kubiak, then you could see like, oh, this guy's not always laid back. He's nuts. So if you are a Sean Payton endorser, I don't think that you need to despair because Colin Cowherd sloppily disguised the story that Sean Payton told him. I think there are multiple different ways that Zoom conversation could have gone. If I'm going to be optimistic about it, what I'm hoping is that the McNairs were very open about the dysfunction that this organization has had and that they've taken measures to rectify it. Beyond 3, one last from Beyond 3. Shire reserved. His first press conference, he really struggled. Yeah, he had the talent takeover speech where he was very enthusiastic. He was very, very enthusiastic. It wasn't Adam Gase level bad, because Adam Gase, remember, looked dodgy. Like he was looking all over the room, and he had his he looked a little squirrely. It looked like he was nervous about getting caught or had been called into the principal's office or something. But we'll hopefully have good news sometime soon with this coaching search. And I think like a lot of you, I'm kind of pleased that so far, but for this little bit of drama via Colin Cowherd, it seems somewhat undramatic with a valid list of clients and a valid list of candidates. And after D'Amico Ryan's interviews with them this week, hopefully we'll get good reports. I know for damn sure D'Amico's not going to be leaking any stories that will embarrass the Texans. I promise you that. You come after me if I'm wrong.